So time then for the press preview. We're taking a first look at Sunday's front pages, and tonight we'll analyse the headlines with the Times and Sunday Times columnist Matthew Syed and the journalist and author Christina Patterson, looking lovely with their flowers in the background. First of all, though, let's take a look at some of the front pages, starting with the Sunday Express, leading with a pledge from the Prime Minister to offer a coronavirus vaccine to every adult in the UK by the end of July, and that some MPs fear his end-of-lockdown plans are too cautious. Well, Boris Johnson's vaccine promise is also on the front of the Sunday Telegraph, raising hopes, it says, for summer holidays. Let's bring in the front of the Observer. A leading scientist and government advisor says there's no need for the government to be ultra-cautious in lifting restrictions on outdoor sports for children and small numbers of adults. And the Daily Star on Sunday says the daughter of Les Dawson believes her father is watching his grandson from beyond the grave. And I'm joined tonight by Matthew Syed and Christina Patterson. Great to see you both. Thanks for being with us this Saturday evening. We need some good news, and there seems to be plenty of it on the front pages, certainly when it comes to Monday's announcement by the Prime Minister. Lots of anticipation, of course. Christina, why don't we start with you? Front page of the Telegraph. It's also actually the front page of the Sunday Express as well. Vaccine for all adults by July as hope is raised for holidays. It could be a good summer, couldn't it?
Well, I really hope so. I really, really hope so. I must say this is very, very good news. And even I, who have not been particularly supportive of the government over the past year, have to acknowledge that the vaccine programme has been a huge success. Clearly, the NHS has played an enormous part in that. But this army of volunteers and people just giving up their time and coordinating this like a kind of mass military operation has been really fantastic. And after the year we've had, and this winter has been long and hard and difficult, and even I, who am, not exactly an outdoor sporty kind of person, am now desperate to get out. So this is really tremendously good news. And if we do manage to have the entire adult population with at least one dose of vaccine by July, that will be fantastic. It doesn't mean we can instantly open the floodgates, as the so-called COVID recovery group would like us to do, but it does mean that we should be on our way back to something much more like normality, which is wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matthew, we'll all be listening on Monday, and we will hear, no doubt, many times the word cautious and caution. Interestingly, on the Sunday Express, under its main headline, it says MPs fear Boris lockdown release is still too cautious. I mean, do you think there is an argument that perhaps the Prime Minister is going to overcompensate this time as a result of mistakes that have been made in the past?
Well, there's certainly been a significant lesson learned, which is if you open up too soon, the happiness and the joy bordering on euphoria that I think all of us would feel if we could get out of lockdown, get out of our homes, meet other people, get back to school, get the shops open, get hospitality open, bars and restaurants, all the things that as social animals we crave, you have to go into reverse. And that undermines everything that you hope to achieve by the early reopening. So it's not impossible there will be an overcompensation. But I do think it will be fascinating to hear what the Prime Minister has to say tomorrow. As Christina said, the vaccine news is excellent. All adults by the end of July will be offered a jab. That's super. Be very interesting to hear what he has to say about the extent, the precise extent to which that has cut down severe illness and death. And also, I'd love to hear the most recent data on the extent to which the vaccination is preventing transmission of the virus. But instinctively, I'd love to see everything open, but I understand the Prime Minister's caution.
I'll just stay with you, Matthew, while we look at the front page of The Observer, because it's a story about sports, a passion of yours. Ban on outside sport can end, top scientist urges Johnson. I mean, things like golf and tennis. And you can sort of understand, can't you, how people want to get back out there, especially as the weather starts to improve. And actually, the risk of playing something like tennis and golf, pretty low.
This, I think, is the significant thing for me. Outdoor sport, the risk is remarkably low. The data has been clear on that almost from the start. And this scientist who's talked to the Observers talked about groups of children being able to play outdoor sport. My son plays football. He's 7 years old. it is such a wonderful thing to do when you've been shut inside, you're being homeschooled, you're not seeing your friends. It's not just the physical activity, it's the sociability. I mean, young people are developing their social faculties at this age. And I think that would be a huge benefit to not just to children in my fortunate circumstance of middle class, people from tower blocks, and that's their only chance to get out. But you're right, for adults too. And I say that, as you say, I'm into sport, but I'm a big tennis enthusiast, and you can play completely safely on the other side of the net from your opponent. You can mark the ball so that you don't both touch them. So I would love to see tennis and golf reintroduced into society.
Yeah, and let's just talk about schools, Christina, briefly, because one of the things, obviously, we're going to hear about is the opening of schools once again on March the 8th. There has been some discussion about what sort of reopening we can expect. What would you like to see? Do you want a full opening of all schools, all pupils, or do you think a staggered approach would be better?
Well, look, I'm not an epidemiologist, but if Chris Whitty thinks that a staggered approach would be better, and head teachers seem to think that a staggered approach would be better, then I'm inclined to think that they know more about it than I do. And I know that there is a lot of anxiety about this so-called Big Bang approach. And given, as Matthew said a moment ago, it would be so awful to undo all the good that has been done during this time by just opening the floodgates too quickly. Children are desperate to get back to school, though. Let's not forget that a quarter of primary school children have been in school all this time. But actually, unfortunately, infection rates amongst primary school children are currently quite high. They are higher than amongst children and young people. They are higher than in any other section of the population at the moment. So we can't assume that schools returning will have zero risk. There will be infections, and those infections will spread to parents and to grandparents and anyone else children come into contact with on school buses or trains or whatever. And so I'm afraid we will expect to see a rise in infections. I hope it won't be too high, but personally I would much rather go for a staggered, cautious approach.
Yeah, OK. Let's stay with the front page of The Observer, Matthew, and this story, I mean, very depressing. You know, we've been talking about the good news that's hopefully coming in the next few days. The bad news, of course, is unemployment and poverty, and this new research that shows household poverty had soared during the pandemic. Talk us through this.
So this is a report that shows that the number of households living in destitution, which is a two-person household after housing costs, living on less than £100 a week, has doubled during the course of the pandemic. This, I think, is going to be one of the long-term scourges, economic and social challenges in the aftermath of this. It's going to massively increase inequality in an already unequal society. And we've seen how the virus itself has typically brought great distress, illness, to poorer and more vulnerable people in our society. And I think one of the most important things for the government, and actually this is going to last for a very long time, Keir Starmer's Labour Party too, setting out credible social and economic policies to alleviate what is going to be a huge legacy of this pandemic.
Yeah, Christine, let's get a final thought on this from you before the break.
Well, it's tragic. It's nothing less than tragic. COVID is a healthcare disaster, and for people who've lost loved ones, it has been a tragedy. But it's also a tragedy to lose a job if you can no longer afford to support your family. To go from kind of average wage, around £26,000 a year, to £100 a week for two people, that is a terrible drop. And our benefits are extremely low by Western European international standards. And I think we've had this rise in universal credit, but it's been made clear that that is temporary. And I think it should be permanent. I think that's a real mistake of Rishi Sunak's, particularly if he really does want to go for rather a Boris Johnson's, who I presume ultimately made the decision. If we really do want to go for levelling up, then keeping people in that kind of level of grinding poverty really isn't going to cut it. I think this is the economic shadow and legacy of COVID is going to be enormous. And that's the test of us as a nation, what we do afterwards. And so far, I have to say, the signs aren't looking great. Yeah, we may get more of an idea, of course, in the budget next month. OK, for now, we'll leave it there. Christina and Matthew, thank you. Coming up, Prince Charles's 100-mile trip to visit the Duke of Edinburgh in hospital. Don't go away.
Everything about Aardman, everything we do is about stories and characters. And in this project, we wanted to use those skills to help raise awareness in young people of some of those common issues that can lead to more serious mental health problems, and in a way that hopefully entertains and informs rather than just lectures. Issues like independence, loneliness, perfectionism, competitiveness, negative social media use. Yeah, we really just wanted to do what Aardman does and hopefully make something that entertains people but also helps them a little. I think certainly before the pandemic, there's quite a lot of quite scary statistics about sort of young people's mental health, and I think that age between 17 and 24, where you might be leaving home or going to university, and those sort of big changes in your life are happening, and that's when those things will start to manifest. And what we want to do is sort of catch people early, if you like. So before it develops into quite big things like depression and anxiety, deal with things a little bit earlier when it's more things like perfectionism and stuff like that. And that's when we hope we can kind of get in there with our films and characters.
Do you think you have the energy to match Donald Trump?
I have more energy than all of them.
While I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, and I'm Sky's US correspondent based in Washington. I've witnessed deep loss in America, deep division, and deep bravery.
How you doing, sir?
Everyone here is being intubated, and the chance of survival is very slim. There are parts of this city that look apocalyptic. They are a symbol of deep anger. We're about an hour outside of the Capitol, and you can see a young man's body just there.
Once y'all leave, they kill you.
Hello again, you're watching the press preview. Still with me, Matthew Syed and Christina Patterson. Matthew, let's get cracking. Front page of the Sunday Telegraph. Talk to me about this. Tax relief for heavy industry to tackle the north-south divide.
Well, we talked, didn't we, in the last half about the importance for support for all of us as citizens. The other big battering that has taken place during the pandemic is those businesses that have struggled because of the virus. And one of the, I think, very sensible proposals is tax relief for manufacturing industries. This will obviously help those industries, but also, as the government is saying, level up the north-south divide. I mean, all of these policies do sound good. I mean, we need support for the high street too. I live in southwest London, Richmond, and so many shops are boarded up, and the decimation of the high street, I think, is not just about the high street, but the social cohesion of communities. But as I say, all of these policies which cost money sound terrific, but one also has to keep an eye on the debt, which is getting higher and higher, and therefore debt interest that we will have to pay gets higher, and the people who have to pay it back will be future generations. So in seeking, I think, completely legitimately to equalise society today, we don't want to build in intergenerational problems. And of course, when there is a very, very big debt, there's always a risk of trying to inflate our way out of it. At the moment, there's no sign of inflation. Retail price has been very low. But with this quantitative easing, it's massively inflating asset prices, which is also leading to higher inequality in the here and now. So I think it's very easy, but perhaps a bit glib, to keep supporting everything that the government is doing to support industry, business, and so on. But at the end of the day, these decisions have consequences which will be felt in the long term.
What are your thoughts on this, Christina?
I think it's kind of strange feeling. We know that the so-called Red Wall are very, very central to Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak's thinking, because those were the former Labour voters who, in Boris Johnson's words, lent their vote to the Tories. And they seem to rule the world, at least in terms of what the government thinks, wants to keep. They want to keep their votes, basically. I'm all for this policy if it has a significant effect on employment. But I do think there's been a lot of talk about throwing money at the infrastructure of the Red Wall, and I'm not sure the infrastructure is the thing we really need at the moment. I mean, clearly, if this will make a significant difference to industries in manufacturing and industries in the north, many of which have been severely damaged by Brexit, it has to be said, ironically enough. But if it does help, then great. But all of this has to be targeted. And to go back to Matthew's point about caution and debt, yes, of course, we need to be careful on that front, although I think this is a wartime situation, essentially. I mean, it's on the scale of a war. And I think, well, in fact, Labour has argued that one of the reasons we were so ill prepared for this pandemic was because of 10 years of austerity and cutting, for example, NHS capacity back to the bone. So I think we need a kind of just a much more solid, healthy society so we can weather, kind of catastrophic events like this in the future.
Yeah, OK. Let's just finish with the royal stories, a number of royal stories, Matthew, going around at the moment. Busy time for royal correspondence. The front page of most of the papers showing that picture of Prince Charles. He popped in to see his father in hospital.
Yes, and there's a lot of speculation about the facial expression of Prince Charles and what it means. I wouldn't wish to speculate on. I mean, obviously, I wish his father all the best in the world. The other royal story, of course, is Harry and Meghan. I have to say, I'm a great fan of the royal family, but I'm not quite as fascinated in the details of Harry and Meghan as I know a lot of other people are. But I, of course, wish the Duke of Edinburgh well.
Yeah, of course, we all do indeed. And Christina, very quickly, a new baby name, August. It's quite an interesting name, isn't it?
Yes, well, August Strindberg springs to mind for those of us who are both literary and Scandinavian in origin. So an excellent choice as far as I'm concerned, and very nice that they've chosen to give him the middle name Philip. That's a very nice touch, and I'm sure that Prince Philip will be very touched by that. So very sweet to see as well the photograph of this tiny shrimp of a baby who is, I don't know if he was early or not, but premature or not, but the contrast between a 99-year-old Prince Philip and this tiny baby is also very touching generationally. So wish them the very, very best.